If you've ever looked at your garden pathways and thought they were nothing more than compacted walkways, good only for moving from bed to bed, you're not alone. Most gardeners treat these spaces as dead zones, covering them with gravel, stone, or plastic weed barriers to keep things neat and dry. But here's what changed everything in one half-acre test garden when soft, shredded grass and fallen leaves were laid down on those very pathways. Earthworms started coming back. Not just one or two, but hundreds, and it happened in less than a month. In this guide, we're going to break down exactly what happens when you treat your garden pathways as living systems instead of hard surfaces. We'll explore how the humble act of layering mulch, not in the beds but in the walkways, can jumpstart a biological chain reaction underground, drawing worms back into the soil and transforming the very space you walk on into a soil-building machine. The secret's in the layering, not the fertilizer. What brings earthworms to your garden isn't fertilizer, it's food, specifically moist, decaying organic material. When you spread a loose mulch of shredded grass clippings and dried leaves on your paths, you're mimicking the exact conditions of a forest floor where worms thrive naturally. These soft, carbon-rich mulches don't just suppress weeds, they trap moisture, they stay cool, they slowly break down into a spongy layer of humus-rich material, especially when they're watered or rained on regularly. The moment that organic matter begins to decompose, microbes move in. And once microbial life explodes in those layers, worms follow, not out of randomness but out of instinctive attraction to food. So, why are garden pathways often the forgotten zone? Traditional gardening advice usually tells us to mulch the beds, compost in piles, and just, leave the walkways clear or maybe covered in stones. But that kind of philosophy honestly ignores something pretty critical. Garden pathways actually cover a significant portion of your growing space, and if you leave them dry and lifeless, well, they really do nothing for your soil system. Even worse, they can get compacted and sometimes even start to repel water over time. When you start treating your pathways like living soil zones, not really planting areas but more like decomposer zones, you unlock one of the easiest hacks for invisible composting and honestly for worm recruitment. You're basically creating a buffet right below your feet, and worms, well, they don't need an invitation, they just show up on their own. Moisture plus mulch, it really does equal earthworm paradise. One of the main reasons worms are drawn to mulched pathways is just the consistent moisture. Bare soil dries out super fast, especially when it's exposed to sun and wind. But if you've got a mulch layer, even just a couple of inches thick, it can actually retain water for days after just a single rainfall. Even during dry spells, a moist mulch layer can stay cool and inviting underneath. So, when you add in the grass clippings, rich in nitrogen, and dried leaves, high in carbon, what you have is really a microbial powerhouse. As those two ingredients break down, they not only attract worms but also stimulate bacteria, fungi, and actinomycetes, which are the same decomposers that help form real humus. The worms aren't just passing through, they're staying, burrowing, feeding, and leaving behind casts that fertilize your soil with every movement. You don't need to till, just layer and wait. What makes this technique so powerful is just how low effort it is. You don't need to till the soil. You don't need to mix the mulch into the ground. You simply lay down your shredded green and brown material on the pathway and let nature do the rest. Earthworms will handle the mixing for you. Their burrowing aerates the soil, their castings enrich it, and their presence alone increases microbial activity. Over time, what was once compacted walkway soil becomes loose and crumbly, water infiltration improves, weed pressure drops, and the surrounding beds benefit too since worm tunnels often connect bed to bed beneath the surface. Worried about slugs or pests? Here's what to know. A common concern with using organic mulch on walkways is the fear of attracting slugs, especially during those wet seasons. While it's true that mulch can shelter some pests, the key really lies in the material and thickness. Thin layers that break down quickly, like shredded leaves and grass, are less likely to harbor slugs than thick wet piles of wood chips or straw. Also, when earthworms arrive in force, They help balance soil ecology, often reducing the dominance of harmful species just through competition. You can also encourage predators like beetles and birds by keeping habitat nearby, which, further balances the system. And in most cases, the benefits of increased worm activity far outweigh the small pest risks when mulch is properly managed. After just 30 days of applying a mulch layer to garden walkways, many gardeners notice real, visible signs. Earthworm casts begin to appear in early morning dew, mulch layers start to shrink and darken, the ground feels softer underfoot. In some cases, neighboring beds begin to show stronger, more vibrant growth, thanks to the network of biological activity now moving laterally through the garden. The longer you continue the practice, the better the results. In about 6 months, you might dig a trench through your pathway and discover black, airy soil just full of root channels and worm tunnels. It's kind of like passive composting, but spread across your garden in a way that builds fertility beneath every step you take. So, just some final thoughts and a quick call to action. The most surprising thing about this method is honestly how little effort it takes. You don't need bins, turning tools, or any kind of complicated systems. All it really takes is your mower bag, a rake, and the will to just let decomposition happen right where it falls. If you're ready to bring life back into your pathways and turn your garden into a connected, thriving ecosystem, just start with what you already have: grass, leaves, and a bit of moisture. The worms will do the rest. If this guide inspired you to look at your pathways a little differently, go ahead and subscribe to Hydrohaven, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who's been battling hard-packed ground without results. Remember, in a living garden, even the walkways matter. Let your soil breathe, feed your worms, and let the earth do the work.